G'day, I'm Alec Gargett. I'm running as an independent for Waite, and this is my very first podcast. It'll be about 10 minutes long because I'm only reading through the introduction to my website, which is about 1,500 words covering just the most important ideas behind my campaign. The website has more than 7,000 words of policy discussion and policy detail, but I'll leave that for the next 2 episodes. Let me know if you're interested in hearing those 2 episodes on my policies and I'll release them. What I'm going to do before I start reading through the website is I'm going to play the audio from one of my ads because I think that is perhaps a better way to start the podcast. It gives a good summary, and then I'll get into reading through the entire website.
G'day, I'm Alec Gargett and I'm running as an independent for Waite in the South Australian elections in March. And on my website, there are short videos explaining my policy objectives. There is a podcast where I read through the entire website and over 7,000 words of policy detail and policy discussion. Now, I don't expect everyone to read all of that, but it's important that it's there because that ensures accountability, and it also ensures that I actually have the passion and the ability to think independently about policy, which is what we really need to solve all these crises that we're facing. Obviously, we've got the cost of living crisis, the hospital crisis, the algae crisis. We're facing a lot of crises, and we can only solve them by supporting candidates who have actually demonstrated they can think independently about policy. And that's why you don't need to think my policies are perfect or to agree with all of them, because I'm going to need to persuade the rest of Parliament if I want to get these policies through anyway. The point is we need to encourage independent thinking by politicians if we want to actually solve these problems. And that's not going to happen if we just vote for political parties where candidates aren't even really allowed to think independently, even if they are capable of doing it very well. So that's why it's so important that I've got so much detail up there on my website. Please do check it out. Maybe watch some of the short videos and see if it's something you think you could support.
Hi, I'm Alec Gargett, and I have a plan to solve the cost of living crisis and the housing crisis, protect and improve our quality of life, our environment, the beauty of our city and our suburbs, and our public services, solve the algae crisis, and stop corporations and the government from contributing to the pollution crises that are causing it. Solve the aged care crisis and hospital crisis, including the ramping crisis. Protect our children, women and men from unfair treatment and harm, including from gambling ads and other harmful advertising. Solve the underemployment crisis. Solve the police staffing crisis. Support measures to protect animals from unnecessary harm and cruelty. Solve the corruption crisis. Forge a better way of doing politics and a more democratic political system. Increase the accountability, efficiency and competence of our Parliament and our policy making. That might seem like a lot, but that's only because the bar has been set so low over the last 50 years. Most of the above is achievable with an adequate plan and enough people supporting it. The only thing we need to solve all of these crises is better policy. And the only thing we need to do to get better policy is to encourage independent, ambitious policy thinkers to run for office and get them elected. We need to elect people who will think and speak independently about better policy and better politics, who are passionate about doing that, capable of doing it, and free to do it, who can collaborate positively with everyone else in Parliament across party lines to help get good policy through Parliament while maintaining the freedom to independently advocate for their electorate, and who will use the platform of Parliament to support the movement towards a better way of doing politics in Australia. It's not just about how the candidate is going to vote in Parliament and whether they will be in government or hold the balance of power. It's about how the candidate will use the platform of being a member of Parliament to hold both state and federal governments accountable. It's about how willing the candidate is to advocate for better policy in a way that appeals to the whole political spectrum. But most of all, it's about the message that you will send to the Houses of Parliament and to Australia by voting for that candidate. Do you want to send the message that Australians are satisfied with our political parties and will vote for them no matter what? Or do you want to send a message that Australians will support independence if political parties don't do better? The more support I get, and the more votes I get, the more encouraged deep policy thinkers will be to put themselves forward at the next federal and state elections, and the more accountable politicians and political parties will have to be to get elected. Fundamentally, voting for me is about sending a message. We need to send a message to the federal and state government and the corporate political parties, and we need to create a new type of politics in Australia. To do that, We need to support a movement of candidates that demonstrate, through their own policy suggestions and discussion, that they are putting their electorate's goals ahead of their party's agenda or any other agenda, and that they have the necessary policy passion, the necessary deep thinking, and the necessary independence to contribute substantially to solving our problems. There are three crucial components to my plan: ambitious policy solutions to all of the crises above, which are detailed below and will be improved further over time, including through feedback from the electorate; an ambitious plan to change the way politics is done in Australia for the better; and a viable and simple political strategy to draw positive attention to these ideas in a non-partisan way. Together, we can send a message to both federal and state governments that if they don't do their job well enough, we'll elect someone who will. At the same time, we can send a message to independent policy thinkers in the community that we will support them if they run for office. Together, these two messages will result in a government that is much more accountable and tries much harder to solve our problems and has the necessary policy skills to do so. Sometimes it seems like most of our politicians and political parties aren't even trying. They play around the edges, throw a lot of money at problems without solving their causes, choose policies that mitigate some problems while making other problems worse, or throw a lot of money at things that barely address any problems at all. Sometimes they choose a hopeless political strategy to boot, and for almost all political parties, it's a divisive strategy. My plan involves a comprehensive set of policy solutions, respect for the whole community, and a pragmatic strategy to support a democratic political movement beyond our own electorate here in Waite and beyond state politics to influence politics for the better at the federal and international levels. We need better policies and we need a better way of doing politics. If I'm elected, I'll use the platform of state parliament to do my part in both. By the election in March next year, I'll get my plan across to as many people in Waite as I can, and I could use your support. If you follow me on social media or video platforms, you can see my videos and perhaps even share them around. This would be a great help, as would sharing this website with whoever you think might be interested. If you would like to donate, I can legally take donations of up to $5,000, but even a few dollars would help. I'll be competing with people who are allowed to spend up to $100,000 on their campaign. Why so much policy detail? This website contains over 7,000 words of policy discussion, including thousands of words of my own policy suggestions, and I don't expect most of you to read all of that. My policy discussions are described in detail below for those who are interested in the details, to demonstrate my passion and my capabilities when it comes to thinking independently about policy and politics, to ensure accountability, to assist policy discussion with those who are interested, and to support further policy development. Ideally, a political candidate should be passionate enough about policy to publish thousands of words of their own policy detail that they have written themselves on their own initiative. Electing politicians who are committed to doing that and free to do that is the only way to ensure accountable, passionate, competent, and dynamic policy development. Candidates don't need to be perfect at policy. Nobody is. Policy is not a precise science. You don't need to agree with all of a candidate's policies. Most people aren't even interested in policy, and that's okay. You don't need to read every detail, but at the very least, you need to know that the details are there and that the details are theirs. You need to know that they are making their own policy decisions for their own electorate, because that's their job. And if we don't elect political candidates who have demonstrated that they're committed to doing that job and free to do that job, they won't. And that's why they aren't. In the end, all of the above crises could be solved with just one policy if it were implemented well enough. Ensure that anyone who can help to solve the crises is encouraged to do so and fairly paid if they want pay. As part of that, ensure that any well-meaning person who wants to work in policy development is allowed fair involvement. In other words, if enough people, including competent experts, were adequately paid to work together on solving our problems, they would solve our problems. But ensuring this is implemented well enough requires voters to take action to encourage independent policy thinkers to run for office and get them elected. My initial policies, I will always be seeking to further improve my policies and ensure they are aligned with the wishes of the electorate, including in response to feedback from the people of Waite. Please send any feedback to alecgarget@gmail.com. The following contents list also serves as a summary of my policies for those who aren't interested in every detail. Reduce bills by providing zero interest or low interest loans for efficiency upgrades including solar water heating and electrification at regulated prices. Provide cheap electricity and cheap healthy foods with government investment, regulation and compensation. Increase wages faster and reduce unemployment through changes to the Fair Work Commission. Reduce cost of living and interest rates by giving the Reserve Bank other ways to control inflation, like charging multinationals and those earning more than $1 million per year for inflationary behaviour. Provide zero interest or low interest loans to the current long-term renter or a chosen prospective resident to cover the gap to a regulated price. Regulate who large portfolio land and housing investors must offer their properties to and how much they can charge. Build high-quality housing instead of destroying it. Build high-quality public housing in appropriate locations. Protect the beauty of our suburbs, our older buildings, and our hills. Provide abundant high-quality aged care and at-home care to quickly solve the ramping crisis. If feasible, reopen hospitals and emergency departments such as the Blackwood Hospital and the Repat Emergency Department. Allow more Australians to study medical degrees and clinical psychology in South Australia. Increase the number of rehab facilities. Call out the federal government for underfunding South Australia. Stop giving our resource wealth away almost for free. Create a quality of life and cost of living commission. Create a South Australian Government Employment Service. Improve the enforcement of visa regulations. Provide adequate training and experience for Australians to reduce skilled migrant visas. Solve the police staffing crisis with new police support officers and better recruitment methods. Address the pollution that caused the algae crisis so the algae doesn't come back. Reduce traffic congestion, air pollution and atmospheric pollution. Improve the Blair train line. Make environmentally friendly choices more affordable. Make our political system more democratic. Ensure more local music in local businesses and fair pay for local recording artists. Ensure adequate emergency housing for the homeless and for victims of domestic violence. Support other services for victims of domestic violence and neglect, including child protection services. Address the environmental causes of mental illness and violence. Prevent harm from advertising and provide better info. Provide a yearly free class in a sport or other healthy activity. Support any measure against cruelty and violence towards animals. Now that pretty much covers it, but I'll end the podcast with the audio from my first ad, which just summarizes a lot of what you've just heard. Hi, I'm Alec Gargett, and I'm running as an independent for Waite in the South Australian elections on March 21st, and I believe we can solve the housing crisis and the cost of living crisis, which is really a quality of life crisis, and the algae crisis, and the pollution crisis that are causing the algae crisis, and the hospital and aged care crisis. The only thing we need to solve all of these crises is better policy, and the only thing we need to do to get better policy is to support political candidates who are passionate about better policy, who are free to advocate for better policy beyond party lines, and who are free to collaborate positively with whoever gets elected to government, and if possible, even with the opposition, to get good policy through Parliament while maintaining the freedom to independently advocate for their electorate. It's not just about how the candidate is going to vote in Parliament, or whether they will be in government or hold the balance of power. It's about how the candidate will use the platform of being a member of Parliament to hold the government accountable. It's about how willing the candidate is to advocate for better policy in a way that appeals to the whole political spectrum. But most of all, it's about the message that you will send to Parliament and to Australia by voting for that candidate. Do you want a country where politicians are rewarded just for towing the party line and being good at campaigning, which will not solve the crises that we are facing? Or do you want a country where politicians are passionate about the policy work that's necessary to solve all of these crises and have the independence to pursue the interests of their electorate? Thanks for making it all the way to the end. It might have been a bit repetitive and I need to work on my radio voice, but hopefully the core ideas still came through, because those are really some of the most important ideas of my campaign. Let me know if you're interested in hearing the next 2 episodes on my policies, and I'll release them. Bye for now. Authorised by Alec Gargett, Independent for Waite Electorate, City of Mitcham.